It started with a flicker of hope. By the light of a lantern, a group of hard-up country boys practiced playing their favorite game in a barn, reaching for a dream.
They couldn't afford a real ball. There was a local farmer that let them use the hayloft in the barn, and they put a hoop, from a barrel hoop, up on the wall, and then they tied up rags as tight as they could get them, and that's how they learned to shoot.
The 1930s were hard economic times, especially in the hills of southern Ohio's Appalachian country. Only their eyes could see the possibility of reaching their dream.
This wonderful story arose at the heart and the depths of the Depression. And in Waterloo, Ohio, 20 miles in the backwoods from Hairston on a dirt road.
They followed that dirt road out of town, all the way to Ohio's capital city, to become state champions. And they did it with a confident and cocky style of play that drew crowds everywhere they went.
They were so good that they would get bored during the games, and then they would create all these wonderful plays that, and then sometimes they just put 3 guys out on the floor, and 2 of them would go and get hot dogs, or once in a while they'd play marbles on the sideline.
Now, 3/4 of a century after their first state championship, many don't remember their unbelievable story of triumph and success. But those who do say in this little town, in the hills of Appalachia, the most unlikely of places, you can find the 8th wonder of the world.
The Waterloo Wonders, they were called, and they lived up to it.
They were just magic.
Somebody in the audience would yell, "Shoot," and they'd pass him the ball and say, "Well, you shoot it if you think you're so good."
People were just fascinated by a team that could come from a town that has like 200 people.
No one could predict it or duplicate it. It truly is one of the great sports stories of all time.
The water rushes along Sims Creek on the west end of the village of Waterloo today, just as it did nearly 75 years ago.
I can remember sitting on people's porches and playing with dolls. We had certain dolls and we had paper dolls, and that's what we girls did. And then in the summer, everybody went down through somebody's cornfield and played baseball. And we swam in Sims Creek.
This is a long way from any city of any size. I mean, and there aren't any big cities around here. But you have Huntington, West Virginia, Ironton, Ohio, and Gallipolis, Ohio. Waterloo's about halfway between Gallipolis and Ironton.
Everyone knew everyone's business. If you were working for Joe, everybody knew that Joe hired you, and that sort of thing.
The mid-1930s, everyone may have known everyone else's business in town, but outside of town, hardly anyone knew about Waterloo. You've heard of a one-stoplight town? Waterloo doesn't even have that.
It was a typical village. They always had a doctor or two, a grocery store or two, and had a undertaking establishment.
But these were hard times throughout the country. It was the Great Depression. There was little hope.
That part of Lawrence County, there were no factories, there was no employment base. The kids they were poor because everyone was poor.
They grew up in the 20s and in the 30s, so the Depression was a large part of their growing up, and they were in the area of southeastern Ohio, Lawrence County, foothills of Appalachia.
I can remember my father talking about hiring people that would clear brush on your farm and work all day for 75 cents. That's the economy in which this story developed and unfolded.
Sims Creek provided a place for children to take a break from work on their farms. They could swim and fish there. But some kids in Waterloo got a little creative when it came to keeping themselves entertained. Some of the boys played basketball in a barn. Locals say it was in this very barn where the future Wonders made a basketball of rags to play the game they loved.
They used to hang bushel baskets up at the bottom of it and use for a basket. Anything else they could find.
That's how they learned the ball handling, because the ball of rags wouldn't bounce, so they just learned to throw the ball behind their back and all of that.
There wasn't any place to play, there weren't any floors, there weren't any formalized games. And so they would make, just like the older folks made toys for children. I mean, everybody knew how to make some kind of a toy or make a whistle out of a piece of wood, or a bow and arrow, or a pair of stilts. And so they're things they played with in the way of sports, the same kind of a make-do kind of thing.
They also learned to dream big in that barn, and the boys imagined what it would be like to bring a state championship trophy home to Waterloo.
It was something just beyond what you would think they could do. Even though they were good, we still didn't know how good they were.
It's a dream come true, and one that could never happen again, and it's a miracle that it happened the first time.
One of the boys who played in that barn was Wyman Roberts. As the 5'10" forward grew older, his love of the game only grew stronger.
You never knew how to take Wyman. He was funny. He had good memory. But he thought nothing of skipping school, you know, if he wanted to.
Wyman was the one that pulled a lot of the pranks. They was playing one night and the fellow trying to get the ball away from him. He just reached out and gave it to him.
I have seen him stand in front of a bewildered opponent and say, "Here, hold the ball out. You want to take it?" And directly the little muscle, and that ball would just roll right around in his other hand. I've seen him do that so many times. People couldn't understand that. But it was just the way they played ball. Effortless.
Wyman's strength was probably going down the corner and shooting sort of a hook shot. And his passing ability was just tremendous.
Tremendous passing ability, he used to get the ball to his cousin, 5'11" junior, Orland Roberts.
Orland was friendly with everybody. I think everybody liked Orland. He was just that type of a person.
Orland Roberts was kind of the ringleader of the comic aspect, or this laid back and who cares personality.
The Roberts boys, I think they were playing basketball from the time they were 2 weeks old, maybe before. But this was what they did, and they did it so well. And they like throwing a ball behind their backs and making baskets with it, or passing to each other that way.
They didn't lob the ball. They didn't do a nice, easy toss. When they threw the ball, they threw the ball. And if you got in the way, you probably couldn't catch it.
But Orland Roberts knew his cousin wasn't the only one who could catch a pass from him. 5'7" guard Stuart Wiseman didn't play in the barn with the boys much, but he spent time at home practicing on a makeshift court. He was ready for whatever came his way.
I remember he graded out little spot on the hill came down. There was a little level spot about 30 feet wide and 100 feet long. And he graded it, and I think he got one basket up, but I don't know whether he ever got more than one up or not.
Stewart was a defensive man, very good. He seldom shot, and he twisted the ball and used a backboard, and it had a reverse spin on, so when it hit the backboard, it went in the basket.
He was tenacious type of person, dogmatic, and he would be the kind of defensive player that would just not stop. He'd be, I can imagine him just being in full court presses and in your face constantly annoying you if you're trying to get the ball down the court.
Curtis McMahon was a little bit of an outsider. Standing 5'11", he came to the Waterloo School in 1932 from nearby Greasy Ridge, but found his place on the team and in the community by sheer determination.
If he missed the ball, often it would roll into the hollow and down over a big bank where he was doing his practice out with his hoop, and so every time he made a bad shot, he had a problem. He had to walk maybe down the hillside to get his ball. So, you know, he wanted to make sure that he hit all of his baskets.
He was seemingly like a little bit above the other boys in the way he looked at things and probably his ambitions.
Those 4 boys were on the team in 1933 when Waterloo won the county championship. The next season, 5'8" forward Burl Drummond transferred to Waterloo from Cadmus because coaches there thought he was too short. But he was just the right size at Waterloo and was the final piece needed to build a state championship team.
They just needed a person with his ability and personality to fit in. You could have the ability but not the personality and it wouldn't have worked. And that's the odd thing, they all had the ability and the personalities to click.
Just went along with the game. He was good-natured. He was a very good athlete. He could play softball, baseball, basketball.
At the time, Burl was rather small, but he developed a set shot. It was all two-handed, and from the corner, and it would arch way up and drop right through the bucket. He was very good on the set shot.
As individuals, these boys were just good, solid basketball players, but together, they were magic.
The level of success that they achieved was phenomenal. All the stars were aligned. The kids were gifted in their own abilities. Obviously, they were incredibly talented at what they were doing. Magellan related beautifully with them on a personal level.
Magellan was the man behind the magic. The Waterloo Wonders head coach had a larger-than-life name, Magellan Hairston, and a serious attitude about basketball.
He was an interesting coach in the sense that he was very analytical, very calm, and approached it from more an academic and a teaching perspective than some of the rantings and ravings you see of coaches today.
If he did say anything to the boys, I think he usually said it to them, not in public, but probably in private, or with the team. He would talk to them, the team.
For the time, he was a flamboyant person. He was like Magellan Hairston was there. There were selected families out in this region who were a little more ambitious, maybe, than others. And he had gone to college. His father, he grew up on a fairly good-sized farm out here, and he and the family had ambition, and he understood in those days that a little flamboyance went a long way in coaching and in playing.
Before returning to Waterloo in 1932 to become principal and coach basketball, Hairston had coached several teams around Lawrence County and brought Curtis McMahon to Waterloo.
Magellan Hairston coached at Windsor, and so he met him over there. He knew him there, and so he more or less brought him here. When he came, when Hairston took this job at Waterloo, and he brought McMahon over here.
Hairston had his work cut out for him at Waterloo. The high school only had 26 boys to pick from.
I remember Magellan had to go study hall to drag somebody out to get 5 players to practice against them at school. There just weren't that many boys in school.
He didn't want anyone to become a star regardless of the other players. So no one even thought about it. All you thought about was winning the ball game. No one thought about being the best or the worst. You just played together.
They played as a unit, and it was almost like it was automated, that I know where you're going to be, Drummonds. I know where you're going to be, Roberts, Wiseman, or any of them. And that's the thing that stuck with me.
Wyman and Orland lived close. They lived in Waterloo, and they was around it. And they'd do things, and Burl and my brother and Kurt fit in with them. And they seemed to know what the other was supposed to do and what he could do, and that's the way they done it.
Hairston also treated the team like it was a family, but was a strict disciplinarian.
He didn't talk back to him. And if you did, well, unlike today, you know, if Bobby Knight touches a player, it's all over the newspapers. I can't remember how many times Magellan caught me up short. When I'd do something wrong, he'd let me know about it. And that's the way he coached.
I think he was always in control of the team. And I mean, I think he directed them and coached them with, you know, with confidence.
Confidence and a very distinct style of play.
They didn't put the ball on the floor like they do today. I remember his coaching, and in practice, if you put the ball on the floor, he took you out, made you sit down. And I think that's one thing that made the Wonders so good, was they knew how to pass the ball.
The 26-year-old coach wasn't all that much older than his players, but he was a father figure to those boys.
He helped the kids. He let them, if they wanted to, they could go stay at his house. He saw that they were clothed and fed.
He bought them all new suits. They wore suit and ties when they were at the state tournament. They had new uniforms, the best that you could buy, and they were very elegant in how they, you know, represented their community. Anything but hayseeds from Lawrence County. They were superstars.
Many still see the people from the little town of Waterloo as hayseeds from Lawrence County, but the people here know their town is something to be proud of. Even though there's not a stoplight here, there is reason to stop. You can visit the place where the magical Waterloo Wonders came to be. However, a critical link to the Wonders story is being removed from the landscape.
It was so old, and we just needed, it was time to go. We were afraid, you know, the roof started leaking. We were afraid that someone would go in there and maybe fall, or, and it was just leaking on our things that we had in there too, so we had to move our stuff out anyway, and then we didn't want a liability here.
The old Waterloo gym is now broken and run down. But back in the Wonders' day, it sparkled and the gym has become part of the Wonder legend.
We debated, we thought about having the roof, fixed, but several years ago we checked into it. Oh, it was $15,000, $20,000 just for the gym. And so we knew we couldn't afford to do that.
Many in and near the town found out on the news one night Belleville was starting to knock the building down. Most are sad, but say they can't really blame her.
It's heartbreaking, but, lots of things in life you have to let go. And we have to let go of that.
Letting go, that's something even Belleville is having a tough time with.
When I was in high school here, they would come back like for homecomings and just for special occasions sometimes, and they would play like our Waterloo Wonder team that we had at the time. And they were awesome. They would throw the ball, behind their back, up over their heads, over their shoulders. You never knew where their ball was going to be. And then when they would shoot, they could still, even when they were older, they could just shoot and make the baskets, and they were just awesome.
But awesome or not, keeping this building up is just too hard for Belleville and her family. And the walls of the gym, where it all started, just have to come down.
I think some of them have mentioned, well, you should fix it up, but we said, we can't afford it, how about some money? No, that didn't work, So we'll just have to settle for our memories.
In 1933, when the Wonders started their magnificent run, the school and gym weren't a pile of rubble. In fact, they were brand new. The finishing touches had just been put on a new gym at the Waterloo School.
It had a seating area, like in a balcony type seating area, and it had nice slick stone walls and a good wooden floor.
It and Cold Grove were the best gyms in the county. Cold Grove had one exactly like it, but they were so much bigger than the other small ones. And even then, we didn't have seating capacity. People line up 3 and 4 around the walls.
It had a tall ceiling. It was made in a kind of a semicircle type ceiling. And the beams were high enough that they could shoot the ball pretty high and pass it in pretty much any way they wanted to. And then there was a room for 300 or 400 people in those balcony seats to yell and scream.
However, the Waterloo gym wasn't that big. It measured just 35 by 62 feet. Today's standard size is 50 by 94. But the Wonders didn't need a lot of running room because the game was a little different back then.
I think the game speed has been speeded up. Because it took time, if your team scored, we went to the center jump after every score. And that took time. It slowed the game up too, to some degree.
If you had someone who could jump real well, you could almost control the ball on offense all the time as long as you wanted to, because you get the tip, you go down and score, you go back, you get the tip, you play around with it or whatever. So that's a huge difference.
The game wasn't only slower, the players were shorter, and the Wonders were on the smaller side.
I don't believe any of them were 6 feet. I think tallest was 5'11". And at that time, we thought that was tall.
However, you didn't need height to create exciting basketball if you were a Waterloo Wonder. The 1933-34 season in Waterloo started off with little excitement. These boys weren't Wonders yet, but they soon would be. The nickname would come after the boys showed what they could do on the court.
A writer for the Ironton Tribune named Stan Morris gave him that name. And so that stuck, and it was just kind of a perfect name.
What else would you have called them? A small school out in the sticks, probably 20 boys in high school, and you get 5, you can take 2 state champions. It would be a wonder.
The name came from the dominance they were able to show, giving other Class B teams in the region a royal whooping, and the fun they had on the court doing it.
They were usually well above the opposing team. You could look at, I would say, you know, often 10, 12 points, they would outscore their opponents.
This was a bunch of ball players like nobody had seen before in that section of the country. I mean, they did things that players today don't do.
The comic type, whimsical part of the Wonders was a kind of an evolution. It wasn't, you had Roberts, who was a leader in mayhem and mischief anyway, Orland, and some say that it started essentially when, like, if he often only had 5 men on the road, and if he wanted to rest 1 or 2 of them, they would just sit down on the bench and he'd play with 3. And you know, 3 people were able to handle most of the other 5. He didn't need 5 people to win a game.
People in the stands would say, pass the ball, and the Wonders would throw it up in the stands of the guy that said that.
I remember one night at Portsmouth. Portsmouth gym had 2 doors. And I think it was Wyman. Their basket was down there at that end. Wyman had the ball going down there. He went out this door. The officials were blowing their whistles like crazy. Everybody was after Wyman because the other team didn't know what to do, so they followed him. And somebody in our team, they knew what he was doing. They just stayed back there. And he came around the hall, he came in and shot the basket.
They didn't think they were showboating or trying to put on a show for anybody. That's just the way they played. That's the way they handled the ball, and that's the way they passed it, and the things that they did and their abilities.
The boys were even known to play 2 games on one night in different towns and win them both.
After the first game, Hairston took the starting 5 awards and started the next game, and then the ones who left finished the first game.
But it was some of their antics off the court that gained them the most notoriety.
Remember one time they went to Cincinnati. At that time, the Magellan Plaza Hotel was it. Some of the boys had never seen an elevator. They drove people crazy riding up and down the elevator.
When tournament time came around, the Wonders were undefeated. The Wonders breezed through the county tournament and outscored opponents 165-69 in the sectional tournament at Gallipolis.
They were primarily a passing team when a lot of their opponents would be more to run and dribble the ball, and so that was one thing. And they worked on that behind the back passes and long pass all the way the length of the court, and so they could move somebody down there and have somebody ready for a long pass, you know, and just lay the ball right up in.
You couldn't tell who was a star. You didn't know who was going to do what other than something fancy.
In the district tournament, the Wonders beat Piketon 34-10, Highland 30-14, and New Boston 23-18. Now it came time for the state tournament in Columbus, Ohio, and the chance to bring home a championship that no one previously thought possible.
They were dominant. There was no looking back, I mean, in the state tournament.
The first matchup was against Muskingum County's Chandlersville High School.
We had an exceptionally good team, well-rounded. I was probably the smallest member of the team. I was only about 5 foot tall, but I had speed, and I accelerated on that.
Ernie Frazier, now 90 years old, was a starting forward for Chandlersville when they met the Wonders in the state tournament. He knew going into the game they were going to have their hands full.
Our coach found out that they were probably much better than we were, and he tried to excel in us the spirit of winning, mostly the spirit of winning, and but they were just too much for us.
Frazier and Chandlersville were able to stay in the game early on.
As I recall, the game was fairly close to the half, and then they drew away from us and put us to the shower.
The Chandlersville boys just couldn't keep up.
Of course, at that time, we had the center jump. After every basket, the ball went back to center jump. We got the center jump all right, because our Fred Pitts, who was our center, was a good center, and he could out-jump the Roberts boys. But as I remember, it was just too much for us.
The final score of the game, 58-29. Even though they were defeated, Frazier remembers the game as one of those big events in life.
World War II and the Waterloo Wonders, well, I've survived a lot.
After Chandlersville, the Wonders went on to beat Lowellville and then Mark Center in the Class B state championship game by a score of 40-26. To finally be able to realize the dream of bringing a Class B state championship trophy back to Waterloo was something the players and the town never forgot.
It gave the community an opportunity to identify with something wonderful and something successful. And we all would look for that opportunity and would enjoy doing that. But in those times and under those circumstances, this was literally the only game in town, and it reflected so well on them that it was, everyone loves a winner, and they were extraordinary winners.
The community welcomed them into, with their version of a ticker tape parade, which was probably to pass around some good chewing tobacco and stuff. And but it was very exciting when they brought the trophy back.
Everybody was up in arms, real proud in this area. There were other areas that were not so proud because, if you have the most beautiful girl here, the girl in the next district who thought she was is a little jealous.
When the next season started, the boys from the Sticks were ready to play some city folk.
By that time they were booking bigger teams, Class A teams and a couple of college teams, and the Pioneer Giants down in Kentucky, that all of them were over 6 feet. One of them was 6'9". None of the Wonders were 6 foot.
During the first 4 games of the new season, they beat Class B and Class A teams without a problem. The Wonders were on a 56-game winning streak. Then came the game in Highland County with Class A team Greenfield McLean.
There was a lot of excitement. It was 2 top basketball teams in the state playing each other. Of course, Waterloo had gotten a lot of publicity because of their showmanship.
The McLean team might not have had the showmanship, but they had the talent, especially in a man who later became an All-American at Ohio State, Jimmy Hull.
My feeling, and I think the feeling of the Greenfield team, the McLean team, was that we were very confident we could beat them. And the game started out, it looked like it was going to be a runaway. We went way ahead of them.
But these Wonders had never been beaten before and weren't about to let the game slip away that easily. As the fourth quarter came to a close, one of the Wonders rose to the occasion.
Then this Roberts boy, Snaggletooth we called him, Orland, I think he's Orland. got real sloppy and hit 3 or 4 long shots and tied the game up.
Orland's play sent the game into overtime, and it all came down to a last-second shot by McLean's Leo Schenner. The Tigers won 26-24. But the Wonders didn't accept their first loss gracefully. They blamed McLean coach Red Armstrong and the large crowd of some 1,200 people for interfering.
The thing they say is the Waterloo player had the ball in the backcourt pretty close to Armstrong, and he reached out and kicked it. So I don't know if that's true or not. I know we were sitting right close to within a couple of feet of the baseline.
There was an excuse, that one of the players had got off a basket at the end that would have either put them ahead or tied the score, and the crowd got in the way.
After they lost to Greenfield, you never saw such a sorry bunch of kids. Such an angry coach. He was quite upset with them.
We were glad that we won, of course, yeah, but didn't feel that it was any great accomplishment. I mean, we were a darn good team, and we beat them. And I think we could, if we'd played again, we'd probably beat them again.
Even though Hairston asked for a rematch, another game never happened. A letter from Greenfield's superintendent, published in the Greenfield Times, strikes down the idea, saying their team had a full schedule already, and education was a priority in his district. The boys bounced back. They lost 2 more games, but went into the tournament season strong.
There was always extreme confidence, and there was no doubt about it. They never had a doubt that they would win it again.
Any doubt was wiped away as the Wonder Five dominated the county, sectional, and district tournaments. The Wonders went into the state title game against Oxford Stewart, outscoring tournament opponents 447-200. However, the players on the Oxford team weren't afraid. They were ready.
The coach drove us up to Dayton from Oxford and had us watch the Waterloo Wonders when they played Fairmont High School. And of course the Waterloo Wonders won the game. And they were quite good. They passed behind their back. In those days you didn't do things like that, but they did.
Carl Forbriger was a 5'8" forward who came off the bench in the 1935 championship game.
This was in front of about as big a crowd as I ever played again before, either football, baseball, or basketball. And so we were kind of thrilled, excited, but we got our minds into the game and stayed with it.
2 other players on Forbriger's team, Tom Shockey and Earl Cheers, came into the game with a plan to guard against the Wonders' behind-the-back passing attack.
I was kind of amazed, really, because it hadn't happened before. We'd heard about it. And so we were on guard. And Tom Shockey, he was 6 foot, and Earl was 6'1", and they played front guard to guard against the guards. And that's where they passed the ball back of their backs. And they blocked 2 of them coming across the court. They didn't try it the 3rd time.
But they didn't need to try again. Waterloo won the game 25-22.
We did lose by 3 points, but we lost to a very good team. And I don't think we felt bad about it, because only that we didn't come through.
Forbriger holds on to the memorabilia marking his team's 2nd place finish with pride, and says it was an honor to play the Wonders.
They were nice guys, and even though they beat us, I was not concerned, because there's always someone better, and that's the way I look at it.
Those 2 years, there was no one better than the Waterloo Wonders. They were only the second team ever to win back-to-back Class B state titles. But the glory days of high school were about to end. For Coach Magellan Hairston, controversy was about to begin. Allegations were made that nearly $4,000 was missing from the Waterloo Athletic Fund, and fingers were pointed at the Wonders basketball coach.
Somebody somewhere said, well, where did all this money go? And has it all been accounted for? You know, he's taking in money here, and the coach is buying everybody's lunch in a restaurant in Ironton. You know, the team's eating, and they just say, we'll pick up the tab for everyone.
Hairston defended himself in a letter to the editor in the Ironton Tribune, saying the money the team made during 2 state championship runs was used to pay for team expenses, and accused school board president J.D. Swango of mooching off the team to pay his own expenses. Hairston ended the letter by saying, "None of these remarks are directed at any of my friends, but are meant solely for J.D. Swango, who pretended to be my friend, but proved to be as deceitful and treacherous as the proverbial snake in the grass." Swango denied those allegations, and, of course, the whole issue caused quite a stir in town.
No one ever proved that there was any money stolen. And there was no records, and it just stayed as it was, a kind of a mystery, and I think most people were inclined to believe that the coach was not involved in anything of miscarriage of justice or anything.
It took a lot of money, really, to take the boys on all those trips and feed them. And I don't think that Magellan hooked anybody. Probably he lost money.
What I've seen out of Magellan, if there was some money came up missing or something out of the sports fund or something, he spent it on the boys, knowing him.
Magellan Hairston decided not to return to Waterloo at the end of the 1936 basketball season, and instead helped manage the boys, who took him to 2 high school state titles at the professional level. Once the boys left the Waterloo school, they had some big decisions to make. A big-name coach, Adolph Rupp from the University of Kentucky, tried to keep the Wonders going.
Adolph Rupp, then coach of University of Kentucky basketball team, offered all 5 of them scholarships to play basketball at the University of Kentucky. And none of them chose to do that.
They were just interested in barnstorming. I mean, they all, with the exception of Wiseman, they weren't interested in going to college anyway. And they were just having fun.
In Stuart Wiseman's family, education was important. His father, former Waterloo principal Frank Wiseman, urged his son to focus on education.
Going to college, if you could, that was something that you really made a priority. And also, I suspect that professional basketball then was more like vaudeville than professional basic sports today.
But the remaining 4 decided to take their game out of the backwoods of southern Ohio to the next level.
The Waterloo Wonders became, after high school, and they started barnstorming and playing semi-pro ball and so forth, their name became known.
They teamed up with a top-notch 5th player, former Ohio State star Bill Hoskett. Hoskett saw the Wonders' potential.
Everyone knew about the Waterloo Wonders, and he wanted to find out what their future was going to be. And as it turned out, I think only one of the Wonders, Stu Wiseman, ended up going to Rio Grande, went on to college. And the other 4, as was pretty typical in that time, their basketball careers were probably going to end with their high school career unless you went on and played collegiately. And since they weren't going to college, he kind of went down and recruited them a little bit and talked to them about maybe they could get together and play a little bit. And because the one thing they really didn't have when you look at the history of the Wonders was anybody of size.
Hoskett's son proudly has his dad's professional Waterloo Wonders jersey on display in his Columbus home. His father had an amazing basketball career, but Hoskett says his dad's time with the Wonders is one of the things he's most proud of.
It's the whole deal. It's the small town, it's the few number of kids in the school, it's the way they played, the style they played, and obviously the name Wonders was added to them because of their style. So they earned their nickname, which is pretty neat in this day and age, and or even in their day and age. It had to be phenomenal.
A phenomenal accomplishment for the professional Waterloo Wonders was getting to play a series of games with one of the best-known teams in the nation.
After they got recognized as, as a whiz-bang team, somebody said, well, why not play a professional game, get the New York Celtics in here. So they made arrangements for that and charged probably a pretty good fee for the time, well above the quarter and 50 cents, that they were used to, and played that game in Ironton. And by a very small margin, the Wonders lost.
But then there was game 2.
They set up a second game then with the Celtics, which was played in Lima, Ohio. They lost that game by 1 point.
After the Lima game, the Wonders got to take another crack at the Celtics.
About a year later, they played a third game. They played in Cleveland Public Hall. The 7,000 fans were there that night, and the Wonders won. They beat the New York Celtics in Cleveland Public Hall.
The final score was 47-39. And the Wonders were legitimate professional ball players. But their reign in the professional arena wouldn't last very long. World War II was about to change everything.
The war came, and the war changed this whole atmosphere. What they might have done without the war, could have been a whole different story.
One of them hardly ever mentioned being a Waterloo Wonder again, even to his wife, who gave an interview just after suffering a stroke in 2007.
We went to the junior prom at High University at the old men's gym, and that was when we both went back to school. And as we were dancing, some boy came up and said, "Were you a member of the old Waterloo Wonder team?" My husband said yes, and that's the last we heard. And as we were watching, driving, dancing, I said, "Who were the Waterloo Wonders? I'd never heard of them before." He said, "Oh, just a team I played with once." That was it.
We'd have pickup games, and he would stop working once in a while and come out and throw the ball around, and we kind of got the idea that he had played basketball before when he did that. We never talked about it very much.
After walking away from the Waterloo Wonders, Stuart Wiseman served in World War II, went on to become an industrial arts teacher, coach a little basketball, married his wife Betty, and became a father. There was one day when Wiseman worked in the Chillicothe schools that one of his sons saw a little bit of that Wonder magic.
My father was walking through the gym to go down to the locker rooms, and somebody made a shot and the ball bounced off the rim and was going out of bounds. And so my father picked it up as he was going down toward the stairs, and he sort of flips it over his back and swish, And he didn't really smile, but you could just feel like, the legend lives on. This is what our Waterloo Wonder is, and he's still got it.
Wyman Roberts always had the magic too. After serving in World War II, Wyman returned to Waterloo and remained a local celebrity.
He played a little basketball with the after the war, and then he got into construction work. That was his biggest thing, I'd say.
His cousin, Orland, also served in the Army in World War II and returned to Lawrence County and Waterloo.
And then he became janitor at school. Did a good job. He'd still go down and shoot the ball over the bars into the basket.
The country never did come out of those guys. They stayed the same after they got out of fame as they did when they started.
Kurt McMahon lived in Dayton after his days as a Wonder were done. He retired from Frigidaire after 32 years as a toolmaker. But Burl Drummond continued playing semi-professional basketball.
He played on a variety of independent teams, and he played on teams with some of the great stars at the time.
He married, had several children, and worked as a greenskeeper for a country club in Florida. After the money scandal, Wonder head coach Magellan Hairston did return to Waterloo to coach again, but later put his coaching days behind him and became the owner of a car lot in Chesapeake, not far from Waterloo. He married and had 3 children. Hairston used the same values he taught the Wonder 5 and applied them to his car business and his family life.
He was, first and foremost, an elegant man with a great sense of personal values. He was, people that knew him, he was a man of his word. He valued personal integrity and honesty more than anyone I've met. He was a man whose handshake was more valuable and trustworthy than any contracts you could write.
The experience of the Waterloo Wonders not only affected the game of basketball, it also changed the fans and the community forever.
There's nothing like it. I don't think that they'll ever duplicate the Wonders.
It is remarkable that we're sitting here 75 years from the time they played basketball, talking about 5 teenage boys playing a kids game 75 years ago. That in and of itself speaks volumes about the power of this story.
In Ironton, there's a mural on the flood wall in honor of the Wonders, complete with a barn where the rags to riches story began. In Waterloo, there's an Ohio historical marker to keep the memory of the Wonders and their historic run alive. But some worry it's not doing the job.
The people now don't really know what it was all about. You have to be over 80 to even realize what it was, you know.
Not far from the marker, at Flag Springs Cemetery near Waterloo, 3 of the Wonder Boys' graves can be found. Burl Drummond, Orland Roberts, and Wyman Roberts were Waterloo boys through and through, all the way to their final resting place. Coach Magellan Hairston is buried down the road from Waterloo in Ironton.
He died of a heart attack, came home from work one day, told my wife that he was really felt odd, sat down on the couch, had a massive heart attack and died.
Kurt McMahon was 63 years old when he passed away in April of 1978 and was buried in his new hometown of Dayton, Ohio. The last survivor was Stuart Wiseman. He passed away in December 1996, just months after the Wonders were inducted into the Ohio High School Coaches Association Hall of Fame. And even though he didn't talk about the Wonder experience, Henry Stuart Wiseman carried it with him until the day he died.
I think it was Orland, was in the hospital at the time, gravely ill, and he went to see him. And as he was leaving, he said, well, we certainly gave a lot of joy to a lot of people in the state of Ohio, didn't we? And he agreed that they had.
Even though the Wonders players are gone, the flame they ignited in that barn more than 3/4 of a century ago is still burning. A high school basketball team that gave hope to a community, a region, and a state. And their light will continue to shine because their story continues to inspire all who have ever reached for a dream.